Welcome to Long Blue Line Podcast Network coverage of the 33rd Annual National Character and Leadership Symposium. I'm Ted Robertson, Multimedia and Podcast Specialist for the Air Force Academy Association and Foundation, coming to you from Polaris Hall at the United States Air Force Academy. This year's symposium centers on the theme Courage to Lead in the Profession of Arms, Combat and Crisis-Tested Character, where attendees and cadets will explore how courage in all its forms shapes leaders when uncertainty, fear, and consequence are real. Our coverage will start with the Center for Character and Leadership Development's Lieutenant Colonel Mark George and NCLS Director, Cadet First Class Jaime Snyder. They'll set the stage not only for NCLS, but for today's coverage. Then we'll talk with four key leaders speaking at the symposium, including Senior Master Sgt. Retired Israel Del Toro on keeping courageous during times of crisis. We'll also talk with Task Force Hope developer and facilitator Major Tara Holmes on preparing leaders to handle crisis before it happens. Then, former POW Major General Retired Edward Mechenbier, USAFA class of 64, on leading in circumstances out of your control. And finally, Annapolis grad and Vietnam-era aviator, Captain Retired J. Charles Plumb, on how character breeds courage. All of our guests' lives and careers reflect the reality of this year's theme through combat, crisis, and service. So I want to bring in our first two guests to help, as I said, frame the discussion today. We're going to dig in to learn what this is all about and sort of the why behind it. Cadet Jaime Snyder, 2026 NCLS Director. Cadet Snyder, you've helped lead the organizing of the National Character and Leadership Symposium, 33rd year for this, as you know. And part of that work, you trained cadets and permanent party. I'm going to ask you to explain permanent party, all of which helps strengthen your own public speaking and leadership communication skills. You want to kind of expound on that a bit?
Yes, sir. So a part of my role being in NCLS is to, one, provide the guidance, the support, and resources on the cadet side to succeed. But what really makes NCLS special is that we integrate permanent party with cadets. So oftentimes, me in supporting and training permanent party is giving them cadet perspective, because while they're over here in the Center for Character and Leadership Development, we're over there in the cadet wing, and I can be the mediator between both parties.
Let's talk a little bit about permanent party. What does that term mean? Who does that describe?
Oh, yes. Permanent party describes the civilian and military faculty that works in the Center for Character and Leadership Development that assists with the execution of NCLS, the National Character and Leadership Symposium.
How big is the team behind this event every year?
It's kind of complex to where we'll get search cadets, we'll get a large number of volunteers, approximately around 300 from the cadet wing. Internal staff consists of 50 cadets who work it throughout the entire year, and around 50 staff members who are permanent party who work in the Center for Character and Leadership Development.
I want to bring in next Lieutenant Colonel Mark George, who is the Experiential and Training Division Chief and NCLS Program Director, the very fortunate man that gets to work for some incredibly talented cadets.
That is absolutely true. Thanks to for having us on. Cadet Snyder has done an outstanding job leading this team. I came into this a little bit late. We've had some reorganization here at the Academy, and after some shuffling, I got to the honor and the privilege to take over NCLS while the planning was well underway. So my job was to just make sure this train kept rolling, that people had the resources that they needed, the top cover they needed. And as Jaime said, he was training me as permanent party member to make sure that I had the cadet perspective, and then we were moving this ball forward as we got to this event.
So coming up in the podcast, we will get to why and what's at the core of NCLS. Colonel, let's start with you. What is National Character and Leadership Symposium designed to do for cadets?
Sure. The National Character and Leadership Symposium, NCLS, is designed to bring exemplars that embody the core values and the traits that we want cadets to have when they become leaders on day one, and inspire them to a lifetime of service.
Cadet Snyder?
We definitely see at USAFA there is a clear correlation with NCLS and character development. One thing we want cadets to get out of NCLS is to further develop leaders of character who are going to join the fight in the Air Force and Space Force. And that's why I see the epitome of NCLS as its opportunity to hear people's perspectives as well as learn from it and apply it to their daily lives.
Gentlemen, this year's theme focuses on the courage to lead in the profession of arms. Cadet Snyder, we'll start with you. How did that theme come together, and why is it especially relevant for cadets right now?
With our current, structure at USAFA, we've had some implement of change. We recognize that the future war and conflict is more prevalent than ever, and that it's important for the cadets to understand that we're changing the way we approach training as well as what we're learning in curriculum. So this NCLS was an incredible opportunity to discuss courage to lead in the profession of arms, but furthermore, courage and crises tested character, which is what we're trying to further push along with what we do in training as well as what we teach in leadership.
You make good decisions when your character is strong.
Absolutely.
You do that. You make those decisions with integrity when your character is intact and it's strong.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that, Colonel?
Absolutely. And I think Cadet Snyder hit the nail on the head that we really want the cadets to understand that, the environments that they're stepping into are going to require that courage to do hard things. And you may, in my day, like we didn't necessarily think about the fight in that way. We were kind of stovepiped, and these cadets, whatever, environment they may be stepping into in the next conflict is going to require a high demand of them. And, their character is their foundation for that.
One of the things you can say about this event is that it brings together voices from combat, crisis, athletics, academia, and industry. How intentional is that mix, Cadet Snyder? And what do cadets gain from hearing such different perspectives on leadership and character?
I think by hearing different perspectives, you get to see how universal courage is. When we say courage, it's not just one thing. It's also moral, social, spiritual. And by looking at different versions of courage, you can understand that there's different ways to actually apply courage. Understanding that courage is not the absence of fear, also knowing that courage is not simply being a confident individual, that it's more complex than you may define courage. And so you can then apply it that way by looking at different perspectives.
Colonel, I'll address this one to you as well.
Sure. Courage, we're talking about courage here, and there's a heavy focus on the combat side with this year's speakers. The thing that sticks out to me is that, courage always involves a decision to do the hard thing. And that's what all of our speakers brought this year, is that they're showing how in different environments, whether it's in a prison cell in Hanoi or up on the space station or, there's a hard decision, and the right thing is sometimes pretty obvious, but it doesn't mean it's easy. It does not mean it's easy to do. And so the courage always involved the decision to do the right thing.
Cadet Snyder?
What he said, I find to be very true. Understanding that courage is not simply doing something physical, but also in a leadership role, especially we're talking to cadets who are going to soon be commissioned officers. It's important to know that you need to make the right decision on and off the battlefield.
All right. So from your perspective as a cadet, and this one is just for you, Cadet Snyder, what does it mean to help shape an event like NCLS while you're still developing as a leader yourself?
What I've seen through NCLS is taking the time to relax, don't focus on the future, and focus where you're at right now, and that's character development. So don't let the pursuit of tomorrow diminish the joy of today. We all have this aspiration to graduate, throw our hats in the air, Thunderbirds fly over, but right now it's important to focus on character development, as that's going to be important as future officers.
That makes 1,000% very clear sense. But I do want to ask you, less than 100 days from the day you toss your hat, and you're giving me a big smile right now.
Yes, sir.
Talk about how that feels right now for you.
It's incredible. And a part of it is less daunting because I can say this institution has really prepared me to commission. And so it's more liberating than daunting for me.
Colonel George, I'm going to direct this one straight to you. And this is an ask of you from the leadership perspective.
Okay.
How do events like NCLS fit into the broader effort to intentionally develop leaders of character here at the Academy?
So I get to the honor of leading the experiential and training division in Center for Character and Leadership Development. And so we're all about creating experiences and those opportunities for cadets to have different types of environments where they'll learn about character. And, right now, NCLS is an opportunity to listen to where people's character was tested, how they overcame it. And then, we also have different events that we try to put the cadets in where we'll actually test their character. And that could be, on the challenge tower. It could be through our character labs where we're having discussions. NCLS is a huge part of that because the planning cycle is so long. So,
Cadet Snyder?
Yes, sir. One thing I wanted to add on to that is with NCLS, one thing that makes this event the most unique experience that I've had is the fact that we get to engage in meaningful dialogue. This isn't a brief. This is an experience for everyone who attends. I've had the opportunity to talk to Colonel George's son, who aspires to possibly come to the Air Force Academy. So I don't want to say this is just for cadets, but it's also a promotion tool and understand that what we do at NCLS is very important, and anyone who wants to attend can come and see what we're doing and how important it is.
I want to thank you for that, by the way. He looks up to you, and that meant a lot. So
that's pretty visionary stuff. That's touching the next generation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, this is for you both. When cadets look back on NCLS years from now, what do you hope they're going to remember feeling or being challenged to do differently?
There is a very strong human component to NCLS. And with that, there's the human experience, understanding that we're getting speakers and we'll see their bios that they're incredible. They have incredible stories of making the right decision when tensions were high, and getting to hear their stories and understand that they ultimately were no different than we are. Some of them were Air Force Academy graduates. Some graduated from the Naval Academy, West Point, other colleges, but they were young 20-year-old people like we were as cadets. And so getting to understand where they're coming from, human experience is vital to NCLS, and how do we grow and understand where they're coming from?
Colonel George?
Yeah, I think what I would want the cadets to remember is how these speakers made them feel. You're right. You won't remember every nugget of wisdom that was said. I just had the opportunity to talk with General Scott Miller, and he was an incredible leader. And I feel like everything he was saying was gold. I wish I'd been able to write it down. And but he really makes you feel like you understand, just how important your role is going to be as a young leader. And, when you come away as second lieutenants from this place, you've had incredible opportunities. Now you're stepping out into the real world. I would think, I want the cadets to remember that, like, hey, what I do matters, and how I lead is very important to getting this mission done.
Lieutenant Colonel Mark George and C1C Jaime Snyder, officer and cadet in charge of the 33rd NCLS. Congratulations on the event. Well done. And thank you for spending time here with us on the podcast today.
Awesome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Hearing from both a cadet perspective and the senior leadership behind NCLS makes one thing very clear. This symposium is intentionally designed not just to inspire, but to prepare future leaders for moments when character will be tested. And that brings me to my first featured guest, a man whose life story embodies what combat and crisis-tested character truly means. Israel D.T. Del Toro, welcome to the podcast. It's an honor to be with you here at the National Character and Leadership Symposium.
Oh, thank you, Ted. Thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
Yes, it's not the first time we've gotten to spend some time together.
It's always great to talk to people, try and spread the word of, with the whole spark and the promise of my dad.
The spark and the promises are the two things that really stood out to me about that interview. Your heart and your soul, man, from a very, very early age.
Losing my dad at 12, and then a year and a half later, losing my mom to a drunk driver, and being the oldest, having to now kind of step up to be like the parent figure to my younger siblings. It was challenging.
out of all of that, you wound up as a retired, you are currently a retired senior Master Sergeant. You took responsibility for your siblings, as you say, after you were orphaned as a teenager. And ultimately, in the service, combat wounded airmen, and you survived catastrophic injuries against incredible odds. And that did not keep you down. One of the things that you did was you became an Invictus Games gold medalist. You're now a national speaker, and you talk a lot about resilience and purpose.
Yes, sir. Yeah, the Invictus, when I won gold in shot put, was pretty awesome. Everyone was just going nuts.
You kind of make me feel like that was a soul-feeding, motivating time for you.
It was, that's because at that time, I was probably one of the senior guys, kind of, obviously, I wasn't one of the senior guys, wounded guys on the team. And so a lot of people looked up to me. And sometimes I wish, people always say, man, it's great. You're such a trailblazer.
Yeah.
But sometimes like, man, I just want to be one of the guys. I just want to be number 10, everything's all done and no one's focusing everything on me. But it's a burden that, I'm willing to carry on to try and continue to help people.
I want to linger here in your background a bit because it's more than just impressive. I think impressive is pretty trite to describe what your background is. Let's start with before the Air Force and before combat and just how your life demanded responsibility at such a young age. And what I want to ask is, how did stepping up for your family shape the leader that you became?
Well, I contribute totally to my dad. I truly do. My dad was everything to me. My dad, I went everywhere with my dad. My dad, he came from Mexico to this country, and he gave up a lot. My family in Mexico are very wealthy. They're ranchers and all that. And he came here with nothing. And he always used to tell me, he's like, don't ever be envious of someone that's successful. Learn from them, ask them questions. He also used to tell me, it's like, if you don't succeed, it's no one else's fault but yourself. I was like, don't blame where you came from, where you grew up from, the situation. It is only your fault. So my dad always had told me these little lessons. And obviously the last lesson he gave me was, the night before he passed, when he tells me, you promise to take care of always take care of your family. And that just stayed with me. And that kind of continued to shape me all throughout my life, all through my journey from, as a young age to teenage to a young adult to the military and to now to this day. That really guided me to who I am now. It's like, I always hear people say, oh man, I don't know if I can do it. And I was like, yeah, you can. You just never know. You weren't ever put in that situation. I always believe, you always hear the old fight or flight.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? And I chose to fight and I continue to fight, I just don't see the flight in me. And, again, the promise of take care of your family. Yes, I tell people, yes, that originated with my family, my brothers and sisters. But throughout the time now, it has evolved to now anyone I see that's having a hard time, that needs maybe to hear a story or read a book or hear a journey to help them find that spark. Because I see them now as my family. I see that as my family, as my mission now.
Let's stay with spark for a minute. It's just one of my favorite things that you've ever talked about. You're down. You've been badly burned. You're worried about whether you're going to survive. And a medic is helping you out. And he does something for you. He says something to you.
Yeah. The medic, I always like to say, yes, I'm Air Force. Those guys were Army. And we bust each other's chops, but we're all brothers and sisters when we're down range. We take care of each other. We tell stories. We talk about our family. So these guys knew what had happened in my past with my family. So when I'm, laying there, after I coordinate getting air and I started the adrenaline going down, I started getting scared and having a hard time breathing. I just wanted to lay down and sleep. The medic came, reminded me, DT, is like, remember what you promised your son, that you'll never let him grow up without his dad. fight for your son. You got to fight for your son. And he's just making me yell it. And you use anything you can to keep your guy motivated, to help that spark keep going. And that's what he did. He found that spark to keep me going, to keep me fighting until that medevac came, and to get me on that helicopter to the FOB, to the hospital, and then to eventually San Antonio.
After that injury, and that's when the fight shifted.
Yeah.
You had to get off the battlefield. You had to get that out of your head. You had to start battling for your recovery.
Yes, sir.
And what did courage look like when progress seemed like it was slow, and at one point nothing was guaranteed?
Yeah, when you had a shift from now being on the battlefield to now a different kind of battle, your recovery, your way of life, it's difficult because you have people telling you this is what your life's gonna be. Being told that you're never gonna walk again. You're gonna be out in the hospital for another year and a half, respirated for the rest of your life, and your military career is pretty much over. I like to say there's two choices again. Who are you gonna be? Are you going to take the easy path, which is I'm going to sit in a chair, accept what they say, hate life, curse the world? Or are you going to take the hard path where I'm going to fight, I'm going to show you I can do this, I'm going to prove that I still have value, and I'm going to come out of this ahead and show not only my son, but the rest of the world, you stay positive, you find that spark, you will come out ahead.
All right. Last question on your background, because we're going to roll all this into why you're here.
Yes,
and
sir.
What messages you want to share with the cadets and the attendees that are here. You did something I don't think most human beings would even think about after that ordeal that you had been through, all those years, everything. You re-enlisted. And it wasn't just a medical milestone. It wasn't because you could.
All right.
It was a conscious decision. So what internal commitment had to come first for you to make that decision?
I guess it was, for me, it was, I loved my job. I knew I could teach. I could prepare these next guys to the next generation operators.
You've never stopped being committed. You've never stopped.
I didn't.
So it brings you to NCLS.
Right.
This is the 33rd year for NCLS. And when you speak to cadets here, what message do you want them to take away with them?
I guess my message more is it's about that. When you're in the military, no matter whatever happens to you, you still have a role to play. Even when I got hurt, did I miss being with my teammates? Yes. But I had to now refocus, saying, okay, I'm here in this hospital and I see all these wounded guys here. And it's like, yes, I'm wounded also, but in my head, it's like, I'm still NCO in the Air Force. I still have a job to do. Yes, I'm hurt, I'm wounded, but the job of a leader is, no matter where you're at, is you try and take care of your troops. You try and make things better for them, even if you never see any of the benefits. That is your role. And so that's kind of what I want to leave with these guys, that, you're always going to have challenges throughout your career, but you always got to remember, it's not about you. It's about the guys under you to take care of you. I had a group of cadets yesterday, and they were just asking me about leadership. It's like, you know what? The best way to be a great leader is to earn the respect of your troops. If you demand it, you're not a leader. But when you earn the respect and they'll die for you, that is the greatest feeling. I gave an example of one of the best moments I had after my injury is after I got hurt, they sent my replacement, and he comes in, and I was able to introduce him to the scout team, to the Army company individuals in leadership, and then the SF team, all these guys I was supporting. And the guy comes in, the TACP comes in, is like, hey, I'm here to replace DT. And all of them tell me, like, you can't replace DT. And I told him that was the best moment. That's the best moment of respect, because I had Army guys saying, he's our guy. And that's the thing I told him, was like, when you get to that moment when your guys say, nah, he's our guy. And it's like, you can't replace him. That is where you've truly earned the respect of your troops.
In Israel, the only word that I can pull out of myself right now for your journey to describe it is remarkable. And you continue to give of yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a wonderful thing. Your opportunity for a couple of final thoughts here before we close out.
Final thoughts, man, putting me on the spot, aren't you? I guess my final thoughts would be, you can't do it on your own. I'm not here right now because I did it on my own. I did it. I'm never going to say that I did. I had friends, I had family, I had my wife, that were by my side all throughout my journey, to, medical individuals. When I had those dark times when I'm going down that rabbit hole, they were there to pull me out of it. So my thing is, like, don't try and do it on your own. It's like, we all need help. The goal is, don't be prideful. There's a reason pride is one of the 7 deadly sins, but, ask for help, ask for advice. It's not going to hurt you. If anything, it'll make you stronger and better. And so that's probably my parting thoughts for the individuals listening to this.
Perfect. Israel DT Del Toro, what a privilege to sit with you again. I want to say thank you from all of us for your service and continuing to lead by a very rich and broad and deep example. Your story reminds us, and should remind us, that courage doesn't end with just survival. It always continues in service to others. Israel, thank you for being here.
No, thanks, Ted. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me again.
Israel's story reminds us that crisis and moral injury don't always arrive on a schedule, and that leaders are often expected to navigate those moments without ever having been taught how. That's where our next conversation takes us, into the intentional work of preparing leaders before crisis arrives. Major Tara Holmes, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you with us as part of the National Character and Leadership Symposium.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
You are currently Deputy Chief of Staff here at Headquarters USAFA. You are formerly Chief of Cadet Development for CCLD, the Center for Character and Leadership Development. By way of background, you flew.
So I am a B-52 electronic warfare officer by trade, and then moved over into white jets, so instructed in the T1. And I've kind of been in education and training for, I'd say, since about 2017.
Okay. You also hold a doctorate in business and management, and you are an AETC master instructor. I will let you explain AETC.
Air and Education Training Command.
Okay.
That's that's our MAJCOM that's responsible for education and training. And they have a pathway to become a master instructor. So I finished the qualifications for that while I was in white jets and working over at Squadron Officer School.
So let's talk about your work with Task Force Hope. We'll talk about what Task Force Hope is, but you are and have been a developer and facilitator of Task Force Hope, which is a crisis and moral injury leadership workshop.
Task Force Hope is about providing immediately useful tools to our workshop participants to prepare them to lead through crisis, whether that is, no kidding, combat related, or whether that's crisis on the home front, going through stuff in life that's really hard. We work through a series of key concepts and exercises through storytelling and participant engagement that hopefully provides our participants some self-awareness and some tools to recover as it deals with their relationships.
We talked about this. There's a lot of nuance in what you're teaching these people. There's discernment in it, and who should you talk to, who you should trust with information that you want to share, because ultimately some of this becomes a pressure release valve, right?
Yeah. So one of the key concepts that we talk about is worthiness, right? I think often people feel pressure to not share what they're going through because they don't think their problems are worthy of attention, whether theirs or someone else's. That's one thing that we spend a lot of time on. And like you said, who to share with and at what level. Some people are more free with sharing than others, and that's okay. So we work through some frameworks that help illustrate how people can kind of work through those levels or gain some self-awareness and some clarity around where they fall. Something that is a deep-seated secret for you, maybe something that somebody else is willing to openly share. They just don't see it as that big of a deal. So it's definitely about self-awareness and learning some tools to help relieve some of the pressure and drain on our batteries, as it were, that comes from holding these things in.
People who are attending the workshop are going to learn some things that they may not realize are draining their batteries. You're teaching them to discern what those are and to be careful to try to avoid those. It sounds like an example to me of things that we don't realize we do that drains us, right, instead of energizes us.
So we use the kind of metaphor of a smartphone, right? So there are things that drain us that are big, that we're taking a lot of energy to conceal the hard things that we're dealing with in our life. But then there's like the pesky background apps. There's the things that are always running in the background of our lives that drain our energy without us really even noticing it. So for me as an officer, but also as a mom and a spouse, some of the things that are always draining my batteries are my to-do list, the laundry app, maybe social media apps. Sometimes I've probably spend way too much time reading the news these days. That's one that's kind of always on for me. We have these big things that are draining our batteries, but then we have these like small things that are constantly going on, right? So Task Force Hope is about recognizing what those things are for us, and then making a commitment to ourselves to make this space and time to recover.
So that brings us to a really unique place. You kind of function at the intersection of character, leadership, and development pretty much every day. So how do you define character when you're responsible for shaping it across an entire cadet wing?
To me, character is the essence of who they are. It is how you show up day after day. It's the habits that you have. That's why when you do something out of character, people are able to say that. We talk about building character strengths as building blocks towards certain virtues. And virtues is really excellence of character. So it's easy to talk about how to be an excellent athlete or how to be an excellent academic, right? That's one of our core values is being excellent. Well, how do you have excellent character? It's really about leveraging your character strengths in a way that can lead you to be more virtuous. And that's the goal.
You've served both operationally and as an instructor. Tell me how those things shape the way you think about preparing leaders, not just to perform, but to endure.
What comes to mind is the importance of training and building those habits. In the previous question, we talked about it in terms of character. You can use any kind of training. It's about building readiness, right? And being able to build those habits so that when you are faced with a challenge, you have a way to work through the challenge, right? That really came out for me, both operationally and as an instructor. So operationally, you rely on your training to get your job done. And then as an instructor, you're helping others build those habits so that one day when your students are faced with challenges, they can rely on their training as well.
We've talked a bit about your experiences and how they shape the way you think about preparing leaders, not just to perform, but to endure. And now let's bring it right down to the direct connection between Task Force Hope and why you are here talking about this program to attendees at NCLS. When we talk about Task Force Hope, it's a program that is really designed to prepare leaders to navigate crisis and recover from both emotional and moral injury. What can you tell me about a gap that a workshop like this fills that traditional leadership education sometimes or often misses?
Task Force Hope is preventative in nature. It's training to prevent people from letting their burdens get the best of them so that they can show up, a full up round. They have the tools to show up fully charged when stuff hits the fan. And not only that they do that for themselves, but then they can help their teammates or their subordinates also get there. It's self-awareness, because we all perform self-care differently. And what you need to recharge your batteries is different from the way that I would do it. So it's being intentional and having some tools to be able to identify what works for you, and then how to make space in your life and building that commitment to yourself to make that space, so that when the next time that you face a crisis, you're not facing it at 10%. You're full up, you're ready to go. So it's that sustained self-care, if that's what you want to call it. And it's important to say that, in a 75-minute session, we're really doing our best to provide exposure to key concepts and these tools. What we hope is that people walk out with the start of something. It's not the end of their work to be done.
How often do you hear the question, why didn't I hear this earlier in my career?
Every workshop. Last year, after the workshop, we had a 1970-something graduate say that exact thing. For me personally, I had 4 people say something, hey, I was a cadet here in 90-something, 80-something, 2000-something. And, I really wish that I would have had this earlier. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring it as early as we can.
Okay, so our last question of our visit. If cadets take just one lesson from Task Force Hope and NCLS this year, what is your hope for that lesson to be?
My hope is that they're worth it. No problem is too big or too small to be dealt with. And like we talked about earlier, I think often people keep things to themselves because they feel like they shouldn't bother others or their supervisors or their teammates with what's going on in their lives. And that's a drain. Like, that's a drain on the system. It eats up your energy, right? But our cadets are worth it. Whatever they're dealing with, big or small, is worthy of being addressed. I hope that's the takeaway, and that we all deal with things, right? We don't always know what other people are dealing with.
Major Holmes, thank you for the work you're doing to prepare future leaders, not just to lead in moments of clarity, but to stand firm in moments of crisis. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Ted.
That focus on preservation, resilience, and moral courage brings us to our next conversation, one shaped by combat, captivity, and a life of service under the most demanding conditions. Coming up next, my conversation with Major General Retired Edward Mechenbier. General Mechenbier, welcome to the podcast. It is a huge honor having you here, sir.
I hope you feel that way in a half hour or so.
Well, the conversation does promise to be interesting because your life is interesting.
Yeah.
That was a pregnant pause, sir.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. It's different,
Just to sort of frame things, you retired as a major general. And what year was that, sir?
2004.
Okay. And you were USAFA class of 64.
Right.
You're a Vietnam-era pilot, having flown F-4s. You were shot down on your 113th combat mission, but that was also your 80th over North Vietnam.
Correct.
Okay. Prisoner of war then for almost the entire 6 years following that being shot down. You come with 3,600 flying hours across lots of different aircraft.
Yeah, I was privileged to fly either for primary capability or for familiarization with 43 different airplanes.
And now you describe yourself as a lifelong advocate for veterans and public service.
Well, yeah, I mean, I go to a couple prisons in Ohio and work with is probably overstating my role. Veterans who are incarcerated for long periods of time. But my role is just to go there, spend some time, shoot the breeze with them, no agenda, no desired learning objective, and let them know that somebody outside knows that they're there.
What I want to do is spend some time in your background.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I want to start with combat and captivity and how that tests leadership in its most extreme forms. And this is, of course, in keeping with the theme of NCLS here. What did character mean to you when circumstances were entirely beyond your control?
The Vietnamese kept us in small groups of 1 or 2 or 3 guys. I mean, we never really, until near the end, and later on when we got a little organization. But it got very personal when at one time I was in a cell with 4 guys, 3 class of 1964 Air Force Academy graduates and 1 poor Oklahoma State University graduate. And amongst the 4 of us, we had a senior ranking officer. And of course, you got the same data rank, you go alphabetical. And so we made Ron Bliss the senior ranking officer in our room. We had a communication system. We had guidelines that, which were basically consistent with the code of conduct. Name, rank, serial number, date of birth, don't answer further questions, you have most ability, keep faith with your fellow prisoners. That was the key. Keep faith. Never do anything that you'd be embarrassed to tell somebody you did.
What you're explaining is how different leadership looks and how you describe it, how different it is from command. So now it comes down to trust and accountability and courage. And how do those show up in those conditions?
It was really a matter of, we always knew we were still in the fight. That was one thing that was with us. And so you just kind of conducted yourself with, okay, I'm not going to let myself be used. Now, we also knew that the more you resisted, pushed back, the less likely they were to make you go meet an anti-war delegation or write a confession or do something else like that. So they tend to pick on, if you will, the low-hanging fruit or the easier guy to get to. So we always wanted to set the bar just a little bit out of their reach.
All right. Having gone through all of that, it really can change people quite profoundly.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look back at it, what leadership lessons stayed with you long after you got out of captivity?
In the movie Return with Honor, Captain Mike McGrath, Navy guy, describes the guys and their ability to resist torture and do things. And that's what you learn. Everybody's got a breaking point. If mine's here and somebody else's is there, that doesn't make me better or worse than them. So you learn to appreciate the talents and the weaknesses, if you will, the foibles, the cracks in everybody around you. And not to exploit them, but to understand them. And then to be the kind of leader that they need.
So one of the recurring themes when you're discussing leadership with leaders is knowing something about each of your people so that you can relate to them in a way that works for them and motivates them.
Yeah. Mark Welch, who's also a graduate, and he was a chief of staff of the Air Force, always had a saying, if you don't know what's going on, it's because you didn't ask.
Now we're going to roll all that into your a long journey between captivity and your visit here to NCLS this year.
Mm-hmm.
When you're speaking to the cadets at this year's event, what's your main hope? What do you hope they understand about courage before they even ever face combat?
Well, courage is a reaction to a clear and present threat. Nobody knows how they're going to, nobody's going to say, okay, I'm going to go to Vietnam and I'm going to get shot down. And when the Vietnamese capture me, I'm going to give them the middle finger and I'm going to be the meanest, baddest, hardest to break prisoner. Yeah. It's how you respond to the immediate perception of bodily harm or being used or something else like that. So courage is, it just happens. It's not something that you can put in a package and say, okay, I've got courage. It's how you respond to the situation, because you might respond quite differently than what you think.
Well, and I have to say, you presented your story and you delivered your message in kind of a unique way. You drew from some contemporary references, specifically 3 clips from a movie that you like. That I was curious, how did you sum up your entire life in 3 movie clips from Madagascar? How did you do that?
Well, the 3 movie clips, when I watched the movie, I was looking at it. I have got 2 favorite movies. Madagascar is one, and the other is a Kelsey Grammer movie, Down Periscope.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I think that is a perfect study in leadership. But in the movie Madagascar, the premise was penguins can't fly. But yet it opens up with them applying resource, innovation, imagination, and they eventually get this airplane to fly. Okay, great, success. Well, like everything else in life, things go wrong. And you got to have, number 1, a backup plan, an exit ramp, or a control mechanism for the disaster that's pending. So, that's the second movie clip we saw. And then the third one was towards the end of the movie when the crash landing has happened and the skipper asks for an accounting, and he's told that all the passengers are accounted for except 2. And he says, that's the number I can live with. And the message there is, you go through life, you're going to have successes, but you're going to have failures. And failure has a cost, and it's not always pleasant, but that's okay, because that's life.
How do you explain how leaders can prepare themselves morally and mentally for moments they can't predict or control?
Mm-hmm. Watch movies like Madagascar and Down Periscope. You know, there's a breadth of unintentional, if you will, guidance on how to be a leader. If you know where to look, or if you're looking for it. And I think that's part of the whole program at the Academy. Nobody's going to say, okay, here's a scenario, lead these resources to a proper conclusion. You know, it's kind of like, okay, here's the situation. What do we do? What can we do? What can't we do? It's like in my presentation, I talk about being able to run across a pasture in 10 seconds. But if the bull can do it, you're in trouble. So you got to realign your thinking, you got to realign your goals, and you got to realign the application of resources. So that's the leadership part right there. It's a realization of what you can and what you can't do. It's a realization of what your people, your resources can and can't do. It's a realization of what the technology you have at your disposal to do your mission can and can't do. So it's all about workarounds and being flexible. And then the other thing is, we live in a world that just seems to be, everything's got a prescription and a protocol on exactly how to do everything. Doesn't work that way. You got to be able to go left and right. You got to be able to be a little imaginative.
What parting thought did you leave the cadets with?
That failure is part of life. It's not death. And I'm part of an organization called American 300. We go around and talk to young enlisted people in all the services to get them to understand that failure is a learning opportunity. It's not a dagger in the heart. And don't be afraid or ashamed to try, because if you don't, you'll never know what your true potential is. So with the cadets, we close with that last part from the movie Madagascar that basically said, okay, success comes with a price. Be aware and accept it.
All right. We've got to close it out here, but recap, if you would, one more time, that message that you want cadets to leave here with from having heard you speak.
You are now a living, breathing, viable, productive part of our United States Air Force. You bring talents that are unique, apply them, but understand that they're all very transitory, and you're part of a larger community. And if you stick with the community rather than the I did, I want, I have, you'll go a long way.
All right. And stepping outside of that very briefly for your final thoughts, what would you like to leave listeners with today?
Be proud of the young men and women who are in our military now, not just those at the Air Force Academy. You know, our whole military structure has changed over the years. You know, it's a dynamic world. You got to be flexible and embrace change. We're so reluctant to change. Change is fine, except when you try to change me, as the old saying goes. But we all have to change. We have to be part of the world in which we live.
General Mechenbier, I want to thank you from all of us for being here, sharing those leadership lessons of yours, and a lifetime of service that will continue to shape others, future leaders, for a very, very long time to come. We appreciate you very much, sir.
Thank you much.
Our final conversation brings us to leadership at the strategic level, where decisions affect institutions, alliances, and the nation itself. Captain Charles Plumb, welcome to the podcast today, sir.
Thanks, Ted. Appreciate being here.
It is a privilege to have you. You retired as a Navy captain in 1991, and you have not slowed down not 1 inch since. We're going to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing in some very interesting spaces and what informs all of that. Naval Academy, class of 64.
Yep, the great class of 64.
The great class, that's how you express class pride.
Everybody knows the great class of 64.
So you are an Annapolis man.
I am, in fact.
No doubt. And a pilot. You flew F-4 Phantoms, and you are a Vietnam-era pilot. You spent most of your time over North Vietnam. Sometimes you got sent to South Vietnam, depending on what was going on. But you said that you have flown 74 combat missions.
Actually, 74 and a half, Ted. I have one more takeoff than I have landings.
We should remember that, and because it's a very important part of your life that we haven't talked about yet.
That
but
is
we
true.
will. Since you got out of captivity, and then you retired a few years later, you became a published author and a speaker. And as such, you have been to every state, several countries, 5,000 presentations you've delivered in the leadership and character development space.
That's true.
Is there any reason you should not be here at NCLS?
Well, I appreciate that. It's this is a great symposium, and I'm really proud to contribute to it.
Captain, you are a former POW.
Yes, I was shot down on my 75th mission, and captured, tortured, and spent the next 2,103 days in communist prison camps.
You said you got moved around a lot.
We did. I was in 6 different camps, and some of those camps more than once. We never really understood why. We kind of suspected that they wanted to try to deny any fraternization with their guards, and they wanted to keep us on our toes because they recognized that being military guys, we were going to have leadership, and we were going to have organization and community, and we were going to to organize to fight them, and they didn't want that. So they moved us around and kind of shuffled us up, which didn't work. We always had a military organization in every camp that I ever went to.
You found ways to support each other. You found ways to have a leadership structure even in captivity.
We were all fighter pilots or air crews. And most of us were, we had 10 Air Force Academy grads from 64 and 5 Naval Academy grads from 64. And so we had a lot of other Academy grads where there were, I don't remember how many, but probably 70 total Academy grads. And so, we were dedicated. We were lifers. We were, we were very focused guys, which helped out a lot, that we knew a lot about military leadership.
You grew up in the Midwest, and you married a Midwestern girl?
I did. My high school sweetheart. The day after I graduated from Annapolis, we got married in the chapel, and my buddies were holding up their swords as we came out of the chapel. So it was a beautiful day.
Let's go back to how you found your way to the Naval Academy.
I was a farm kid from Kansas, never seen the ocean, never been out of the 4 states of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri. Never been in an airplane. And I needed an education. Found that the Naval Academy offered me an education.
Outside of Air Force Academy circles, you probably already know that we think of salty sea dog sailors when we think of people going in the Navy, but you chose aviation.
I did. As a kid, I would see these Piper Cubs fly over, and I was fascinated by flight and wondered if I'd ever be able to ride in an airplane. That was my thought when I was a kid. I didn't have any hopes of ever being a pilot, let alone a fighter pilot. I was out of the realm. Nobody, as I grew up, ever told me that I could do that or I should do that, or it would be a hope of mine to ever pilot an airplane. But I went to the Naval Academy and found out that was one of the options, and I took advantage of that option.
Yeah, and it led you, of course, to over North Vietnam, and the rest is that part of your history.
Launched on the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk on my wife's birthday, the 5th of November. Waved goodbye to her and promised her I'd be back in 8 months. Didn't make it.
Hard, very hard story to hear. Let's talk about all of that informing your presentation now. Again, 5,000 of these delivered in the leadership and character development space, but you talk a lot about in your presentation, and you keynoted here at NCLS, the mental game side of this, the integrity, the choices that you have to make, and character that sort of frames all of that.
My message to the cadets, and really to most of my audiences, is around challenge and adversity, And I tell the cadets that, they work awfully hard trying to get a degree. They study, they go to computers, they read books, all to get a degree. And what I point out to them is that more important than the degree that they will get from the Air Force Academy is the character that they build while they are here. That the integrity first, is part of their motto. And if in fact they can learn and live that integrity, if they can learn and live the commitment that they have, if they can learn and live these kind of ethereal things, the things that you can't measure, the things you can't define, the things that crop up in your mind, in the back of your mind, are more important than the lessons they learn from a computer. And so that's kind of my message.
We're in a leadership laboratory here. The art and the science is character development. And you're talking about a kind of character that leads people to make good decisions and make those decisions with integrity in mind. How did that play into your captivity and getting you through that?
Of course, I studied leadership at the Naval Academy. And I think that my POW experience, more than teaching me anything, it validated what I had learned. And the whole idea, and I love the fact that this is called, the Character and Leadership Symposium, because lots of times you see leadership without character. That's a negative kind of leadership. And if a leader does not have character, he doesn't last very long and he's not very effective. And so if you can, if you can keep your character up front, the leadership can follow easily. And that's pretty much what we had in the prison camps. Several of the qualities of leadership that I promote are the things that almost came natural in a prison camp. First of all, we had to find a focus, a reason. We had to find, and that was developed by our leadership in the prison camp. Return with honor. That was our motto, return with honor. And we all rallied around that.
So all of that said, you're standing here in front of a really big group of people as a keynote speaker. A lot of cadets, mostly cadets. Yeah?
Now, there were cadets. I'm speaking on a panel with Ed Mechenbier, my good buddy. And we're on a panel with mostly cadets. The first presentation, the keynote, was by invitation only. So there were a number of civilians in the audience, a number of cadets. There were Naval Academy midshipmen in my audience today, and we had ROTC people, and from all over the country. So it was quite a wide audience.
Quite a wide audience. And so if we're just focusing on what you leave with cadets, what do you want them to take away from their experience today?
I hope they understand my message that more important than the degree that they graduate with is the character that they graduate with, and the importance of the integrity that they learn here, because that was vital in the prison camp, is integrity. We had to have each other's back, and when we finally were released, we refused to be released until all the sick, injured, and enlisted men had gone home. And it was a question of integrity. It was a question that this is the right thing to do. It's not the easy thing to do. Largely, the integrity thing to do is not the easiest thing to do. And that's what I wanted to leave with the cadets. In addition, I want them to know that regardless of what situation they're in, they still have a choice. And their choice is the way they respond to the surrounding adversity situation that they're in.
An Annapolis grad of 64, Midwest kid from Kansas who makes it into the cockpit. And like you said, 74 and a half flights.
That's right.
Then some time in captivity, then to a published author with thousands of presentations all over the country and some in other countries. What final thoughts would you like to leave today, sir?
Well, I think I've already told you, you're a great interviewer, Ted, and I appreciate your questions. I think, finally, this whole idea of self-determination, and I think that we all, and not just the cadets, but graduates and families and business people, families, that we all have choices. And sometimes when we deny the choice and give up that ability to make our life better for ourselves, and we do it sometimes even, we're not even thinking about it. It's just automatic to blame somebody else for the problem. And in doing so, we give away that choice.
Don't give away the choice. Yeah, build that character and stick by your integrity all the time. Captain J. Charles Plumb, what a privilege it is to meet you, sir. Glad that you're here at NCLS and keynoting like you are. And I do hope that our paths cross again.
Ted, thank you very much. I appreciate your willingness to tell my story. Thanks for that.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you. As we've heard throughout these conversations, courage isn't a single moment. It's a lifelong practice. From cadets just beginning their journey, to leaders shaped by combat and crisis, to senior commanders responsible for forces and futures. Character is tested when certainty disappears, and it's revealed by how we choose to lead. That's the challenge of the National Character and Leadership Symposium, and it's a challenge that extends far beyond these walls. I'm Ted Robertson. Thank you for joining me for our Long Blue Line Podcast Network coverage of the 33rd National Character and Leadership Symposium. This podcast was recorded on Saturday, February 21st, 2026.